What's the worst announcement your school ever made? I was a junior at Oak Ridge when they installed those cheap PA speakers that crackle so bad you can barely understand anything. Third period, Mrs. Peterson's history class. We were half asleep watching some Dust Bowl documentary when that horrible feedback noise hit. The kind that makes your teeth hurt. Attention students and faculty. It was Principal Winters, but his voice sounded off, not the usual someone's in trouble tone. More like he was reading a hostage note or something. My pencil froze mid-doodle. Due to circumstances beyond our control, all students must remain in their current classrooms until further notice. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. The room went dead silent. Even Tyler, who literally slept through the fire alarm last month, sat up straight. Someone dropped a textbook and everybody jumped. Mrs. Peterson walked to the door and quietly locked it. Her hands were shaking so bad she dropped the keys twice. I'd never seen her scared before. This was the woman who broke up the huge fight during homecoming without blinking. Is this like a shooter thing? Whispered Emma next to me. My stomach dropped to my feet. We'd had those Alice drills before, but this felt different. Way different. The speaker crackled again. Teachers, please check your emails immediately. Do not share the contents with students. Mrs. Peterson grabbed her phone and I swear all the color drained from her face like ghost white. Everyone away from the windows, she whispered. Now enclose the blinds. We huddled against the far wall between the bookshelves. Aiden tried peeking through the blinds, but Mrs. Peterson practically yanked him back by his hoodie. Is anyone getting anything on their phones? Zoe asked. I checked mine, no signal. Everyone else too. Total dead zone. Like someone had flipped a switch. Outside we heard sirens, lots of them getting closer. Then the sound of heavy boots in the hallway running. The PA system came on again, but this time it was Vice Principal Garcia. Her voice was shaking too. Teachers, please identify any students who rode bus number 17 this morning and mark them on the Google form that was just shared. Jason raised his hand slowly. That's my bus, he said. His face went pale. What's happening? Mrs. Peterson just stared at him like she was seeing a ghost. She typed something on her laptop and whispered something to Jason I couldn't hear. The announcement continued. Any student who rode bus 17 needs to be escorted to the gymnasium immediately. Have them bring only themselves and their backpacks. When Mrs. Peterson opened the door, the hallway was lined with police officers in what looked like hazmat gear. Full suits, masks, the works. One pointed at Jason. That him, bus 17? They took Jason away. He kept looking back at us, completely terrified. I'll never forget his face. Like he thought he was never going to see any of us again. We stayed locked down for 6 hours. No bathrooms, no food, just rumors spreading through everyone's half-dead phones once the cell towers came back online. Someone said it was a bomb threat. Someone else said chemical attack. Biological weapon. Every horror story you could imagine. Mrs. Peterson wouldn't tell us anything, but I caught her crying when she thought we weren't looking. Turned out the bus driver for Route 17 had found a suspicious package under one of the seats that morning. Some kind of homemade device that had been leaking an unknown chemical the whole ride. They found it because Bryce Adams' new white Nikes turned yellow where his feet were touching the floor. When they finally let us go home, my mom was hysterical. Hugging me in the parking lot like I'd come back from war. They're saying on the news some kids might have radiation poisoning. She sobbed into my hair. 3 days later they made another announcement. The device wasn't radioactive after all. Just some senior's chemistry project that fell out of his backpack. An accident. Nothing malicious, but Jason never came back to school. Neither did 4 other kids from bus 17. Their lockers stayed untouched. Nobody talked about it. Teachers changed the subject if anyone asked. At graduation the next year they left 5 empty chairs in the front row with white roses. Nobody mentioned why they were there. Principal Winters just paused for an awkward moment of silence before continuing with his speech. I still flinch whenever I hear a PA system crackle. And sometimes I check under my seat on public transportation just in case.
People who unknowingly save someone's life. How'd you do it? I was having the worst day of my life. Just got fired from my dream job for something that wasn't even my fault. My girlfriend had broken up with me the week before, and my car had broken down that morning. I was walking to the coffee shop near my apartment. Basically broke, planning to nurse one cheap coffee for hours while I figured out what to do with my life. The line was long, and I noticed this girl ahead of me was counting change over and over. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands were shaking as she counted the same coins repeatedly. When she got to the counter, she quietly asked for just a small black coffee, the cheapest thing on the menu. The barista told her it was $3.50. She counted her change again. I watched her face fall as she realized she was 60 cents short. She started to walk away, looking absolutely defeated when something made me step forward. Wait, I called out. Add whatever she wanted to my order. She turned around with tears in her eyes and whispered that she just needed the small coffee. I told the barista to make it a large with whatever she wanted in it. But that small moment was just the beginning of something much bigger. She sat at a corner table, and I couldn't help but notice she wasn't drinking the coffee. She was just holding it, staring out the window with this blank expression. Something about her seemed really off, but I didn't want to intrude. I figured everyone has bad days. I finished my coffee and left, forgetting about the interaction entirely. I had my own problems to deal with. Job searching, figuring out my next move, trying to rebuild my life after everything fell apart. 3 years passed, I got back on my feet, found a better job, met my now wife Sarah. Life had completely turned around from that terrible day at the coffee shop. Last month Sarah and I were at our engagement party when a woman approached me. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. She was well-dressed, confident, with bright eyes, and a huge smile. What she told me next absolutely floored me. You probably don't remember me, she said. 3 years ago you bought me a coffee at the shop on 5th Street. I was the girl who didn't have enough money. I vaguely remember the incident, but told her it was no big deal. Just a few dollars. Her face grew serious. That day was supposed to be my last day alive. She explained that she'd been planning to end her life that morning. She'd lost her job, been evicted from her apartment, and felt completely hopeless. She decided to use her lost $3 to buy one final coffee before going through with her plan. When she couldn't even afford that coffee, it felt like the universe was confirming she didn't deserve to be here. But then I stepped in. She said that simple act of kindness from a complete stranger made her think that maybe there were still good people in the world worth sticking around for. Instead of going through with her plan, she spent that day in the coffee shop holding that warm cup and decided to give life one more chance. She called a crisis hotline, got help, and slowly started rebuilding. She told me she'd graduated college the year before, just got promoted to manager at a nonprofit that helps people in crisis, and was engaged to an amazing man she'd met in therapy. She'd been looking for me for 3 years to say thank you. I stood there completely speechless. This successful, radiant woman was telling me that a $4 coffee had saved her life. I had no idea that while I was having the worst day of my life, someone else was having what was almost became their last day. She handed me a card. It was an invitation to her wedding next month. She said she couldn't get married without thanking the stranger who reminded her that kindness still exists when she needed it most. At her wedding, I gave a toast about how sometimes we save each other without even knowing it. How the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impacts. How that $4 coffee taught me that even on our worst days, we might be someone else's answered prayer. She's now a crisis counselor who's helped dozens of people through their darkest moments. All because one stranger bought her a coffee when she needed hope more than caffeine. I still buy extra coffees for people short on change. You never know who needs saving.
How did you trick your entire high school? I was the quiet kid in high school. Not bullied, not popular, just the kind of person who could disappear into a crowd without anyone noticing. By junior year, I was sick of being invisible. I didn't want to be prom king or the guy everyone admired. I just wanted to prove I existed. So as a joke, I decided to run for class president. It was a tradition that the popular kids won. Every year, someone with a perfect smile, varsity jacket, and campaign manager would dominate the ballot. I figured I had zero chance, so why not have some fun with it? I started with a few posters, nothing serious. Just handwritten signs that said things like chocolate milk fountains in every hallway, mandatory nap time after lunch, school uniforms outlawed unless they're superhero capes. I fully expected them to be torn down or ignored, but people started noticing. I'd get random nods in the hall. Someone slipped a Jacob for President chant into the lunchroom one day. Kids I didn't even know would come up to me and say, "Hey, are you really gonna install vending machines in the bathrooms?" At first I laughed it off, but then Blake, the actual frontrunner and poster boy of the student council, took notice. During one of his campaign speeches in the gym, he threw shade. "Jacob can't even talk to girls, how's he going to talk to the principal?" People booed. That's when it got real. I leaned in hard. I started wearing a suit to school every day. Not a real suit, it was an oversized blazer from a thrift store, a button-down shirt I'd borrowed from my dad, and a clip-on tie I found in the back of my closet. I walked the halls like a politician, shaking hands, pointing at people and saying, "You've got my vote." I printed fake polls that showed me ahead by 30 points. I slid them into lockers like they were confidential reports. I gave cryptic one-liners in the hallway like "Change is coming" and "Blake's afraid of the truth." Rumors started flying. Someone said I had the AV Club on my payroll. Another claimed I had dirt on Blake's disciplinary record. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Then came the final day before the election. I convinced the AV Club to let me hijack the morning announcements. I stood in the media room, heart pounding, and I delivered a 2-minute speech that made absolutely no sense but sounded inspirational anyway. "The establishment doesn't want me to win," I said. "But this isn't about popularity. It's about freedom. About vending machines that dispense confidence. About justice and naps." I played dramatic orchestral music underneath. The bell rang 2 minutes late because no one could stop laughing. Election day came and I walked in like a man on a mission. People high-fived me, even a few teachers gave me a thumbs up. Then came the results. I won. By a landslide. I didn't just beat Blake, I destroyed him. He looked like someone had canceled summer break. But here's the kicker. The next day the principal called me into his office. "Jacob," he said, "this is awkward, but there's a GPA requirement for holding office. You need at least a 3.0. I had a 2.8. Blake became president by default, but everyone knew who really won. For the rest of high school I was Mr. President. The nickname stuck. It was in the yearbook. Teachers used it. Even during graduation someone yelled it when I walked the stage. Blake got the title, but I got the legacy.
My friends traumatized a burglar, but it was so funny we got away with it. I was house sitting for my uncle during spring break when I invited 3 friends over. His place was amazing. A beautiful 2-story home with a pool, big TV, and a fully stocked fridge. The perfect spot for a mini vacation. On the second night, we were playing cards in the living room when the power suddenly went out. We checked the breaker box, but nothing was wrong. Then my friend Jake looked outside and noticed all the street lights were still on. Something wasn't right. We grabbed our phones as flashlights and checked around. That's when we heard it, scratching at the back sliding door. Through the glass, we could see a man in a black hoodie trying to force the lock open. My heart dropped. I wanted to call the police, but my phone had no signal. The storm from earlier must have knocked out the cell towers. We were on our own. My friend Sophie, who's normally the quiet one, suddenly whispered, "I have an idea." She pointed to the stairs leading to the basement. "We need to lure him down there." The basement had a heavy metal door that locked from the outside. If we could get him down there, we could trap him until morning when the police could come. We positioned ourselves in the darkness. 1 by the basement door, 2 behind the couch, and me near the kitchen. Though we deliberately made noise upstairs, like we were all sleeping up there, and left the basement door open with a flashlight shining on my uncle's expensive watch collection. Within minutes, the back door slid open. The man crept through the kitchen, crowbar in hand. He spotted the open basement door and the gleaming watches. Just as we hoped, he headed straight for them. The moment he was halfway down the stairs, Sophie slammed the door shut and we all piled furniture against it. We could hear him banging and shouting from below. That's when things got weird. My friend Tyler grabbed my uncle's old Halloween decoration from the closet and pulled out this creepy clown mask. Let's have some fun with this guy, he whispered. We took turns opening the small viewing slot on the door while wearing the mask. Saying nothing, just staring. The burglar's shout turned to confused questions, then to nervous laughter, and finally fearful begging. Sophie found an old record player and put on this creepy music box melody that echoed through the basement vents. Tyler lowered a rope with a noose at the end through the laundry chute that connected to the basement. I was worried we were taking it too far, but I was laughing too. We kept it up all night, whispering in different languages through the door crack, sliding cryptic notes under the door, saying things like, "The ritual begins at dawn," and making scraping sounds against the floor above him. By morning, when the storm cleared and phones were working again, we called the police. When the officers arrived and opened the basement door, they found the burglar huddled in a corner, shaking and mumbling about them coming back for him. The police looked confused until we showed them what we'd done. One officer had to step outside because he couldn't stop laughing. Turns out our midnight visitor had robbed 6 other houses in the neighborhood that month. They took our statements, but no charges were filed against us. The lead officer even said, "Whatever you kids did worked better than jail time. This guy looks too scared to ever break into another house." As they were putting him in the car, the burglar looked at us and said, "You people are crazy." We just smiled and waved goodbye. My uncle never found out what happened in his basement that night. But we now have a new tradition whenever we get together. We put on that same creepy music box melody and watch as we all start laughing uncontrollably. Ever told one tiny lie that completely changed your life? During my first week at a new job, I accidentally nodded when my manager asked if I had experience with Excel macros. I'd barely used Excel beyond basic spreadsheets, but everyone was staring at me in that conference room, and I panicked. "Yeah, I worked with them before," I mumbled, figuring I could watch a quick tutorial later. The next morning, my manager dropped a massive project on my desk. "Since you're a macro expert, I need you to automate our entire quarterly reporting system by Friday." My stomach dropped. This wasn't something I could learn from a 10-minute YouTube video. Instead of coming clean, I stayed at the office until midnight for 3 straight nights, frantically learning Excel from scratch. I joined online forums using a fake name to ask embarrassingly basic questions. When coworkers walked by, I'd quickly switch screens to look like I was confidently coding. By Thursday, my eyes were bloodshot. I consumed dangerous amounts of coffee, and I had somehow cobbled together a working macro that barely functioned. The situation escalated when my manager was so impressed that she mentioned my expertise to the CEO during a company-wide meeting. "We're lucky to have found someone with such specialized skills," she announced as I sank lower in my chair. The CEO immediately perked up. "Perfect, you can lead the training session for the executive team next month." My life flashed before my eyes as everyone applauded. Soon, coworkers from other departments started emailing me Excel questions. I created elaborate excuses to buy time while frantically researching their issues at night. "I need to consider the optimal approach," I'd reply professionally, while actually having no idea what they were talking about. My apartment transformed into an Excel shrine. Books, sticky notes, and printouts covered every surface. I canceled dates, missed family gatherings, and once fell asleep in the office bathroom after an all-nighter. My friends stopped inviting me to things. They assumed I was going through something. I was. It just involved pivot tables. The breaking point came when a company newsletter featured me in their employee spotlight section. There I was, smiling awkwardly, beside a quote about my passion for data automation and my supposed background developing macros for my previous employer. My mother called confused. "Honey, I didn't know you were a computer person. You used to call me to set up your Wi-Fi." The night before the executive training, I was preparing my resignation letter. I'd rather quit than face humiliation in front of the leadership team. As I practiced my final presentation at 2 a.m., the office cleaning lady stopped by my desk. "You still here?" she asked. I confessed everything in a sleep-deprived breakdown. She listened, then started laughing. "My son teaches Excel at the community college. Let me call him." Her son arrived an hour later, reviewed my work, and looked genuinely impressed. "This is actually really innovative," he said. "You've approached these problems differently than someone with formal training would." He helped me refine my presentation and explain the technical terms I've been misusing. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't drowning. I actually understood what I was talking about. The executive training went shockingly well. The CEO called my solutions refreshingly intuitive and asked me to develop a company-wide training program. As I was leaving, my manager pulled me aside. "I need to confess something," she said quietly. "I don't actually understand macros myself. I've been taking notes on everything you say, so I can sound knowledgeable in meetings." We stared at each other for a moment before both bursting into laughter. I wasn't alone after all. 2 years later, I'm now legitimately the head of our data automation department. I've taught workshops at industry conferences. I consult for startups. Sometimes I still can't believe that one panicked nod in a meeting completely changed my career path. And yes, the cleaning lady's son is now my business partner. We run a weekend consulting firm called Macro Masters.
Military personnel, what piece of missing equipment caused the most ridiculous chain of events? In my 6 years as an Army supply sergeant, I've seen equipment go missing all the time. But nothing compares to the chaos caused by a single missing master key to our armory. It started on a Friday afternoon. Captain Hayes was doing the weekly key inventory when he realized the master key, the one that opens every weapons cage in our armory, was gone. Not misplaced, not signed out, gone. Now, civilian life, losing a key means getting a new one made. In the military, losing a key to weapons storage is DEFCON 1. Especially when the base commander had just implemented a zero equipment accountability incidents policy after we'd already lost 3 radios that quarter. Captain Hayes immediately called a company-wide formation. 200 soldiers standing at attention while he announced no one was leaving for weekend pass until the key was found. You could actually hear dreams of beer and freedom dying. First, we searched the obvious places. Key logs, commander's office, the safe where backup keys were stored. Nothing. Then we moved to less obvious places. We literally unscrewed air vents and checked inside coffee pots. Still nothing. By hour 6 soldiers were crawling through ceiling tiles and checking inside toilet tanks. The first sergeant made us empty every trash can on base and sift through the contents by hand. Someone got desperate enough to check inside an emery. Like the key had somehow been vacuum sealed inside a packet of chili mac. At midnight the base commander got involved. He called military police who treated the supply closet like a crime scene. They dusted for fingerprints, interviewed everyone who'd accessed the armory that week, and started building a list of suspects. They even interrogated Private Jenkins for 3 hours because he'd once joked about stealing a Humvee. By Saturday morning the post was locked down. No one in, no one out. The commanding general was notified and he scrambled an intelligence team to determine if this was espionage. Meanwhile soldiers were taking apart office furniture, checking inside computer towers and removing ceiling tiles. The real turning point came when someone mentioned the key might have accidentally been taken off base. That's when things truly escalated. MPs began searching every vehicle leaving base. The colonel's wife got stopped trying to go grocery shopping and had her car searched for 45 minutes. They even checked inside her lipstick tubes. Naturally she called her husband who then called everyone else in the chain of command. By Saturday night rumors were flying. Some claimed North Korean spies had infiltrated the base. Others were convinced it was an inside job to steal weapons. The paranoia reached such heights that 3 soldiers reported their roommate for suspicious behavior because he received a package that week. Sunday morning the base commander decided enough was enough. He authorized an any means necessary approach. They brought in metal detectors and drug-sniffing dogs which made absolutely no sense for finding a key. But everyone was beyond logic at this point. The nuclear option came when they got approval to X-ray all outgoing mail and care packages. This violated about 16 regulations, but desperation had set in. They even drained the swimming pool at the base recreation center. I'm dead serious. All weekend Captain Hayes looked progressively more doomed. His career was evaporating before our eyes. The first sergeant had stopped yelling and entered a state of eerie calm. The military equivalent of accepting death. When Monday morning came the lockdown entered its 3rd day. That's when our battalion's master laundry facility called. During the routine washing of uniforms they found a key in the commanding officer's pants pocket. The same commanding officer who had been leading the witch hunt all weekend. The silence in the command center when this news arrived was deafening. The colonel had checked his uniform in for cleaning Friday morning and had completely forgotten about the key in his pocket. He'd personally authorized the vehicle searches, the mail screening, everything. All while the key was tumbling around in an industrial washing machine. The lockdown was lifted with no explanation. The colonel never addressed it. We were all just suddenly told to resume normal operations. The paperwork documenting the incident mysteriously disappeared. 3 months later the colonel received a promotion and transfer. The kicker, they changed all the locks anyway, making the whole weekend completely pointless.
Military police, what excuse for being late, was so creative you almost believed it. Private Miller shows up to formation 2 hours late, soaking wet, covered in mud, missing his left boot, and carrying what looked like a medieval shield made out of a stop sign. I'm thinking drugs, alcohol, maybe he got rolled by locals downtown. Standard Friday night disaster. But before I could even start the interrogation, he throws his hands up and goes, I can explain everything, but you're not going to believe it. Kid's got my attention. In my 8 years as an MP, I've heard everything. DUI excuses, family emergency lies, the classic my alarm didn't go off routine. This better be good. Miller takes a deep breath and launches into the most elaborate story I've ever heard. Claims he woke up at 0500 like always, but when he stepped outside his barracks, he found a note pinned to his door. Handwritten message saying his girlfriend Sarah had been kidnapped by her ex-boyfriend. Some local guy named Jake who just gotten out of county lockup. According to Miller, this Jake character was some kind of survivalist nutcase who lived in the woods outside Clarksville. The note had GPS coordinates and a threat. If Miller called the police or brought back up Jake, would hurt Sarah. Had to come alone, unarmed, before sunrise. Now I'm thinking this is either complete fiction or the dumbest thing any soldier has ever done. But Miller keeps going. Says he borrowed a buddy's truck, drove out to these coordinates in the middle of nowhere, found an old hunting cabin, Sarah's car parked outside. He approaches the cabin, and this Jake guy comes out with a shotgun. Turns out it's not a kidnapping. It's some twisted challenge. Jake's been planning this for months, ever since Sarah started dating Miller. Wants to prove he's the better man through trial of combat. I'm rolling my eyes at this point. Sounds like bad reality TV. But Miller pulls out his phone and shows me photos. There's the cabin. There's a crazy-looking dude with a shotgun. There's Sarah tied to a chair, looking terrified. Jake had constructed this whole obstacle course in the woods. Rope climbing, mud crawls, puzzle solving, the works. Winner gets the girl. Loser gets beaten up and left in the forest. Miller had to complete it without calling for help, or Jake would hurt Sarah. The shield? Jake made him craft it from materials he found in the woods. Hence the stop sign he'd apparently ripped out of the ground. Had to use it to defend against tennis balls fired from some homemade cannon Jake had built. Miller shows me video on his phone. Shaky footage of him army crawling under barbed wire while this lunatic fires tennis balls at him. Kids documented this whole thing like it's American Ninja Warrior meets Deliverance. 2 hours of this insanity. Miller finally completes all the challenges. Jake, being a man of his word apparently, releases Sarah and gives Miller his truck keys back. But not before destroying Miller's phone and taking his boot as a trophy. The whole drive back, Sarah's crying. Miller's trying to process what just happened. And that's when they realized Jake had slashed Miller's tires as a parting gift. Had to walk 5 miles in one boot to get cell service and call for help. By the time AAA showed up and they got back to base, formation was already over. Miller spent the last hour trying to clean up enough to be presentable, but gave up and just ran straight to the company area. I'm staring at this kid, covered in evidence of whatever the hell he'd been through, holding a stop sign shield, and I realize I actually believe him. The story's too crazy to be made up. Plus he's got photos, videos, and Sarah's statement backing him up. I called his girlfriend. Sure enough, she confirms the whole story. Even gives me Jake's full name and address. Had to drive out to the cabin with local police. Jake's whole setup. Guy had been planning this for months. Arrested him on kidnapping charges. Miller got off with a counseling statement for failing to report a crime in progress. His chain of command was so impressed with the creativity of his excuse that they submitted it for the unit newsletter. Miller and Sarah are engaged now. Sometimes the most unbelievable excuses turn out to be completely true. And sometimes the best military training is learning how to think on your feet when some lunatic challenges you to medieval combat.
What has your child done that brought you to tears? My son Tyler is on the autism spectrum. Been that way since he was little. Not the kind you see in movies where they're math geniuses. Just a normal kid that struggles with change and reading people's faces. When he started middle school last year I was terrified. That place is brutal for any kid, let alone one who's different. The first week I found him sitting alone in our garage, rocking back and forth. He wouldn't tell me what happened. Just kept saying I'm fine over and over. The next morning I noticed his favorite dinosaur keychain was missing from his backpack. The one he'd had since he was 4. When I asked about it he just shrugged and said he didn't need it anymore. That night while doing laundry I found it stuffed in his jeans pocket. One of the legs was broken off. A few days later his teacher called. Tyler had been eating lunch alone in the bathroom. My heart shattered into a million pieces. I tried everything. Talking to the school. Offering to drive him to another one. Even suggesting homeschooling. He just kept saying I'm okay mom I can do this. My daughter Mia is 2 years younger. The complete opposite of Tyler. Talks nonstop and makes friends in seconds. I never worried about her. One Tuesday I got a call from the principal. My stomach dropped but it wasn't about Tyler. It was Mia. She'd gotten into trouble for skipping class. When I picked her up she wouldn't look at me. Just stared out the window the whole drive home. Are you going to tell me what happened I finally asked. I saw some 8th graders making fun of Tyler at lunch she mumbled. They were doing this thing where they pretended to be robots because of the way he talks sometimes. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. So you skipped class because I was hiding in the bathroom crying she said. And I didn't want Tyler to see me upset because then he would know something was wrong. I pulled over right there on Maple Street. Honey it's okay to be. No it's not she snapped. Because I'm supposed to be helping him. Not crying in a bathroom. That's when she pulled out her phone and showed me a checklist app she'd downloaded. It was titled Operation Brother. Every day for the past month she'd been setting her alarm for 6 a.m. An hour before I got up to prepare things for her brother. Make sure his blue folder is on top because that's for first period. Text him at 11:32 to remind him about lunch. Check if anyone has posted anything mean about him online. She'd created a whole system. A 9-year-old girl running interference for her brother while I had no clue. I sit with the popular girls at lunch she said quietly. So I made them start saying hi to Tyler. Told them he knows all about dinosaurs and can name like 100 of them. Yesterday was Tyler's birthday. We always struggle with parties. Too many people and too much noise. This year he said he just wanted pizza at home. No big deal. But when walked in from school there were 3 kids from his class sitting awkwardly on our couch. Not the cool kids just other quiet ones who liked science and video games. Mia stood nervously by the door. I didn't invite a lot of people she whispered. Just the ones who wouldn't be too loud. And I told them not to sing the birthday song because Tyler hates that. I watched as my son cautiously sat down with these kids. They started talking about some video game I didn't understand. But Tyler was actually talking back. Not just nodding or giving one-word answers. Later I found a crumpled note in Mia's room while picking up laundry. It was a list of instructions she'd given these kids before Hay came over. Don't touch his stuff without asking. He might not look at your face when talking that's normal. If he gets quiet just wait don't try to make him talk. His laugh sounds different but it's still a real laugh. The next morning I heard Tyler laugh from the kitchen. Real laugh. He was texting with one of those kids from yesterday. Mia walked by with her cereal. See she said casually. I told you he just needed the right friends. I'm sitting in my car right now in the Target parking lot right now typing this through tears. My 9-year-old is braver and smarter than I ever was. And I never even noticed what she was doing all this time. The strangest part is when I thanked her she looked confused. But he's my brother she said. Like that explained everything. And maybe it does. Single parents what's your worst dating story? After my divorce I avoided dating for 2 years. Most guys ran when they heard I had a kid. The few who didn't usually wanted to play stepdad immediately which freaked me out. My friend finally convinced me to try online dating. I matched with David after a week of swiping through profiles. Good job at some tech company. Said he loved kids but didn't have any yet. We planned to meet at the Starbucks on 5th Street Saturday. I was waiting in line for his arrival text when I hear my daughter's voice behind me. Mommy. I turn around totally confused. My daughter's supposed to be at her dad's house this entire weekend for his custody time. But there she is running toward me. My ex-husband trailing behind looking embarrassed and slightly out of breath. Sorry Mike says sheepishly. She forgot her inhaler. Had to swing by your place to grab it from her bedroom. As I'm kneeling down to hug her and make sure she has her inhaler, this guy approaches our little family huddle. Sarah? He asks hesitantly looking between all of us. I look up. It's David my date. Right on time just like we planned. But he's not looking at me anymore. He's staring at my ex-husband with this really weird expression, like he's just seen a ghost. Like, David says. His voice getting noticeably higher and more strained. I'm standing there like a complete idiot as my online date and my ex-husband stare at each other in obvious recognition. Turns out they worked at the exact same company downtown. Different departments. Mike's in accounting. David's in IT support. But they'd been sitting in the same monthly budget meetings together for the past 8 months. David knew Mike had an ex-wife named Sarah who lived across town with their daughter. Mike knew David was recently single and had started dating someone named Sarah from a dating app. Neither of them ever bothered to connect the obvious dots. The coffee date became the most awkward hour of my entire adult life. David kept glancing over at Mike who was clearly uncomfortable, and kept checking his watch and my daughter was confused why mommy's new friend seemed to know daddy so well. After Mike finally left with her David got really quiet and weird. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. This is really strange, but does Mike actually know you're actively dating other people right now? Of course he does I said starting to feel defensive. We're divorced not dead. We talk about this stuff but something felt really off about his reaction. David seemed almost disappointed as if he was secretly hoping for drama. 2 days later Mike calls me with a serious tone I hadn't heard since our custody discussions. Sarah we really need to talk about this David guy. Apparently ever since our coffee shop encounter David had been cornering Mike at work and asking invasive questions about me. Not normal small talk either. Really weird personal stuff about our marriage. Why we got divorced. Whether I was emotionally stable as a mother. If I had money problems. Mike was genuinely freaked out. This guy's been systematically pumping me for detailed information about you for weeks, Sarah. Way before you two supposedly matched. I felt physically sick. I went back and examined David's dating profile with fresh eyes. In the background of one picture at what looked like a company party, I could clearly see part of Mike's company logo on a banner. David hadn't randomly matched with me at all. He'd been watching me, learning everything about my life through my ex-husband, then crafted the perfect online profile specifically designed to appeal to me. I blocked him immediately on everything, but the story gets so much worse. Last week my daughter's teacher called me at work. A man matching David's exact description had been hanging around during school pickup time asking detailed questions about my daughter and claiming to be a family friend who might start picking her up sometimes. I filed a police report that same afternoon. Turns out I'm not his first victim. He has a documented pattern of targeting recently divorced mothers. Mike and I are actually closer now than we've been since our divorce 3 years ago. Nothing romantic, but we're finally co-parenting like a real team for the first time. David thought he was manipulating me and dividing us. Instead, he accidentally brought our family back together and fixed our broken communication. The police investigation is still ongoing. I'm completely done with dating apps forever, but our daughter finally has both parents working together again, which is honestly worth more than any romantic relationship I might have found. Waiters, what's the worst first date you've ever seen? I've been serving at this upscale Italian restaurant called Brio for almost 5 years now, and I've witnessed more first dates than I can count. Most blend in my memory, but there was one last Friday that I'll never forget. The dinner rush hadn't started yet when this guy walked in, mid-20s, wearing a button-up that still had the store creases, clutching a small bouquet of mixed flowers that looked like they came from the grocery store down the street. He was 45 minutes early for his reservations and asked for a specific table by the window that he'd requested when booking. As I set his table, I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he placed the flowers on the empty chair across from him. He kept checking his reflection in his phone camera, smoothing down his hair and practicing what looked like conversation starters under his breath. So what kind of movies do you like? He whispered to himself, then shook his head and tried again. Is this your first time at Brio? The nervousness was radiating off him in waves. For those 45 minutes he just sat there nursing a water, rearranging the silverware and checking his watch every 2 minutes. Our manager even asked if everything was okay, and he assured us that his date was coming at 7:30. When she finally arrived, the contrast was immediate. She was stunning, designer clothes and perfect makeup, but she barely acknowledged him as she sat down. Before he could even hand her the flowers, she pulled out her phone and started scrolling, saying, "Sorry, work stuff. You know how it is." The guy's face fell for a split second before he plastered on a smile and gently placed the flowers on the table between them. I brought them water and took their drink orders, a simple beer for him and a specific brand of sparkling water with exactly 3 lime wedges, not slices, for her. When I returned with their drinks, she was still glued to her phone. He was desperately trying to connect, asking about her job, her hobbies, and her family while she gave one-word answers without looking up. The few times she did engage, it was to correct him or talk about herself. I work in marketing, he shared enthusiastically. Nothing fancy, but I really love the creative aspects. That's nice, she cut him off, finally looking up from her phone. I'm in finance, made 6 figures last year. What was your question again? The entire meal continued like this. He ordered a reasonably priced pasta. She ordered the most expensive item on the menu plus extras on the side. He asked thoughtful questions. She checked her social media. He laughed at her rare jokes. She didn't even smile at his. After their appetizers were finished, she excused herself to use the bathroom. The moment she was out of sight, his shoulders slumped. He stared at the half-empty wine glass across from him, looking like someone had let all the air out of him. That's when I noticed him check his wallet nervously, counting bills before preparing his credit card. Everything okay with the meal? I asked, approaching his table. Yeah, everything's fantastic, he replied with a forced smile. Could we get the check when you have a moment? I think we might be wrapping up soon. 10 minutes passed and his date still hadn't returned. I approached again to check if everything was okay, and he finally admitted what happened. She texted me from the bathroom, he said, showing me his phone. The message simply said, "This isn't working. You're sweet but boring." I left through the back door. Don't text me. I expected him to leave immediately, but instead he surprised me. Could I get a to-go container for her entree when it arrives? And maybe add a tiramisu to the order? Of course, I said, confused. Are you still hungry? He shook his head with a small, genuine smile. My little sister is working the night shift at Memorial Hospital. She loves this place but can't afford it on a nurse's salary. Might as well turn this disaster into something nice for someone who deserves it. As he was leaving with the carefully packaged to-go containers, he handed me his credit card slip. He left a $50 tip on a $75 bill. When did you realize your parents were bad at parenting? I was 8 years old when my teacher sent me home with a note about bringing lunch to school. I hadn't had lunch for 3 days straight and she was concerned. I remember staring at that folded paper the entire bus ride home, my stomach twisting with more than just hunger. Mom and Dad were arguing when I got home as usual. Empty bottles littered the coffee table and the kitchen sink was piled with dishes from last week. The fridge had condiments and beer but not much else. I stood in the doorway for 15 minutes before either of them noticed me. When I finally handed Mom the note, she screamed at me for making her look bad. Dad told her to calm down, which only made her angrier. Neither of them actually addressed the lunch problem. That night I climbed onto the kitchen counter and searched through every cabinet. I found an old box of crackers and a jar of peanut butter that wasn't too far expired. I made my own lunch for the next day, carefully wrapping crackers in a paper towel since we didn't have sandwich bags. By 4th grade I was doing my own laundry, though I could barely reach the knobs on the washing machine. I learned which clothes could hide stains the best, which was important because we rarely had laundry detergent. I figured out that hand soap sometimes worked as a substitute. The worst part wasn't the neglect. It was watching my friends' parents. I'd go to birthday parties and sleepovers and notice entirely different worlds. Homes where parents asked about homework, where fridges were full, where children didn't have to parent themselves. At Bobby Miller's house, his mom made everyone breakfast in the morning after our sleepover. She cut oranges into smiling faces and asked if I wanted more bacon. I ate 3 helpings and nearly cried when she gently touched my hair and said I was such a good eater. By middle school I had a system. I got myself up, dressed, fed, into school. I forged signatures on permission slips and report cards. I learned to say my parents are just really busy when teachers asked questions. I became an expert at making excuses for why no one ever came to my performances or games. When I was 14, my English teacher assigned an essay about our greatest role models. Everyone wrote about their parents, famous athletes, or historical figures. I wrote about TV dad Danny Tanner from Full House and how I wished someone would tuck me in at night. Or teach me life lessons. My teacher kept me after class. Concern written all over her face. That was the first time a social worker visited our home. Of course my parents cleaned up their act just long enough for the visits. They were charming when they needed to be. The kitchen got cleaned, the fridge got filled, and they acted like the temporary changes had always been our normal. On my 16th birthday I waited all day for some acknowledgement. Around midnight I finally accepted that they had forgotten again. I baked myself a small cake from a box mix we had in the pantry, saying happy birthday in a whisper, and promised myself that someday I'd have a family who remembered important dates. I remember once overhearing my friend's mom on the phone explaining why she couldn't attend some event. I'm sorry, but it's my daughter's school play that evening. I can't miss it. She's playing a tree and she's so excited. Okay. Her daughter was playing a tree and this mom rearranged her entire schedule for it. In my senior year my guidance counselor asked why I hadn't applied to any colleges. She helped me apply for scholarships and financial aid, becoming the adult who changed my trajectory. I moved out the day after high school graduation. My parents barely noticed. Sometimes people ask if I'm sad about not having a relationship with them now. The truth is you can't miss what you never had. They say you don't truly understand your childhood until you're an adult looking back. But some of us knew exactly what was happening while we were living it. We were the children raising ourselves, becoming adults long before we should have had to. How did that one kid at your school pass away? A kid, Aaron, who had just moved to town. Everyone would pick on him on the bus relentlessly. I joined in at first but got tired of watching other people go too far with the bullying. He would usually end up getting off at a stop far from his house, crying just to get away from the torment. One day I was last to get on the bus and had to sit in the first seat as it was the only one left. Of course this spot was right next to Aaron. I actually talked to him on the ride home. No bullying, just basic small talk. He thanked me for talking to him before getting off at his stop and ran to his house. He said I was the first person who actually talked to him since he moved to town. 2 hours later, as I was going to a friend's house, I noticed smoke and started making my way towards it. I soon see that it is Aaron's house that is on fire, with neighbors frantically pounding on the walls and trying to break windows, yelling his name. I stood there just 100 yards away in shock as I could see smoke literally pouring out of every soffit and window in the house. The next day the bus driver informed us that he had died in that fire. So sad. It's been almost 40 years since that happened and I still feel regret about my participation in bullying this kid. He moved to a new town, never felt welcomed, and dies 7 days later. I have told this story to all 3 of my kids in hopes that they think twice before treating anyone any differently than how they want to be treated. Janitors, what's the most chaotic mess you've ever seen? I've cleaned schools for 15 years, but nothing prepared me for the science fair disaster of 2019. I was doing my regular evening rounds when the principal called me in a panic. Steve, we need you in the gym now. The way her voice cracked told me this wasn't a typical spill. When I pushed open those double doors I froze. The entire basketball court was covered in a thick bubbling blanket of what looked like toothpaste foam. It was oozing across the floor, dripping down the walls and the scoreboard. The smell hit me next, vinegar mixed with something chemical that made my eyes water. In the middle of this disaster stood a single science display table, somehow still standing like an island in a sea of foam. The poster board read, Elephant Toothpaste Extreme Edition. It turns out a 7th grade science was named Austin had decided that the regular elephant toothpaste experiment wasn't impressive enough. For those who don't know, it's when you mix hydrogen peroxide with dish soap and yeast to create a foamy reaction. But this kid had brought industrial-strength hydrogen peroxide, the kind used for pool cleaning, and combined it with not only dish soap but 5 different cleaning chemicals he'd taken from the janitor's closet. When the judges came to his table he dropped in his catalyst and everything went wrong. Instead of a controlled demonstration he'd created a chemical volcano that wouldn't stop growing. The reaction was so violent it knocked over 3 other projects which spilled their chemicals into the mix. The foam started spreading across the floor, consuming everything in its path. Kids were screaming, parents were grabbing their children, and teachers were desperately trying to maintain order while standing on chairs. But the foam kept coming, doubling in size every few minutes. By the time I arrived the gym was evacuated and the fire department was on the way. The principal handed me a mop with shaking hands while the chemistry teacher frantically explained that we couldn't use water because it might make certain chemicals react worse. I called my buddy Jack, who had worked in hazmat cleanup. He told me to wait for professionals, but the principal was panicking about the gym floor. The expensive hardwood would warp if left soaking overnight. For 16 straight hours we worked alongside hazmat crews in full suits. The foam had seeped into every crack, climbed into the air ducts, and even damaged the electrical system. We had to remove sections of the gym floor, remove the HVAC system, and repaint half the walls. The total damage? $67,000. The school's insurance barely covered it because they claimed intentional misuse of chemicals wasn't in the policy. As for Austin, he actually got a scholarship to a science summer camp. Some professor from the state university saw the news story and was impressed by his enthusiasm for chemistry, albeit misguided. Meanwhile, I spent weeks getting foam out of places I never thought possible. The kicker came 6 weeks later during parent-teacher conferences. Austin's mom stopped me in the hallway and handed me a gift card. Austin feels terrible about what happened. she said. I nodded and thanked her. It was $20 to Starbucks for $67,000 worth of damage. Now whenever we have a science fair I stand guard at the janitor's closet, and each teacher has to approve experiments personally in writing. What's the coldest thing your sibling ever did to you? My twin brother Jake and I were inseparable until we turned 16. That's when our grandfather died and left us his vintage motorcycle collection, 12 bikes worth about $80,000 total. The will said we had to split everything equally when we turned 18. Jake got obsessed with this one bike, a 1969 Harley that Grandpa called his baby. Jake would sit in the garage just staring at it, planning how he'd fix it up. 2 weeks before our 18th birthday I came home from work and found Jake in our shared bedroom crying. He handed me a crumpled paper, our parents' divorce documents. Dad was moving to Florida, Mom was keeping the house, but she'd have to sell Grandpa's bikes to pay for it. Jake grabbed my shoulders. Listen. If you sign over your half to me I'll buy the Harley for Mom and we can keep at least one bike in the family. I could see he'd been planning this speech, his hands were shaking. I trusted him completely, we were twins, we shared everything, so I signed. The day we turned 18, Jake went to the lawyer's office alone. He came back that evening with keys to the Harley and a huge grin. Got it for $3,000, he said. Mom's so happy. Something felt wrong. I called Mom. Her voice got weird when I asked about the bike sale. After 20 minutes of me pushing she finally admitted the truth. Jake hadn't just bought the Harley, he bought all 12 bikes for $40,000. Exactly half their value. My signature had given him legal ownership of my entire inheritance. My own mother had helped him do it because he claimed that I didn't care about motorcycles. He said you just wanted the money for college. Anyway, she whispered. I confronted Jake that night. He didn't even look guilty. You were never into bikes like me, he said, polishing the Harley's chrome. This way they stay in the family where they belong. I moved out the next week. We didn't speak for 3 years. Then last week I got a call from Mom. Jake was getting married and wanted me as his best man. He misses you, she said. Can't you just forgive and move on? I drove to his engagement party. Jake ran up and hugged me like nothing happened. Bro, look what I built. He walked me to his garage, all 12 bikes fully restored gleaming under the lights. This collection is worth $200,000 now, he bragged to his fiancée's parents. My grandfather left me and my brother a real treasure. His fiancée Sarah smiled at me. Jake's told me so much about how you two restored these together. I looked at Jake, his face went pale. He'd been lying to her for months about our shared hobby. I smiled back at Sarah. Actually Jake, why don't you tell everyone you really got these bikes? The room went silent. Jake started stammering about family business and complicated legal stuff. I pulled out my phone and showed Sarah the original will, the document I signed, and the sale records I'd gotten from the lawyer. Her face changed as she read. You stole your brother's inheritance, she whispered. Jake tried to grab my phone. It's not stealing if he signed it over. Sarah stared at the dates on the documents. He was 17 when he signed this. This isn't even legal. That's when I dropped a real bomb, Sarah. I've been working with a lawyer for 6 months. The statute of limitations hasn't run out. I can still contest this in court and get half of everything back. Jake's face went white. You wouldn't. I looked around the room at his fiancée, her parents, and all his friends who'd heard him brag about his collection. You're right, Jake. I won't take you to court, but I am going to tell Sarah's parents exactly who they're letting their daughter marry. I turned to leave, then looked back one more time. The coldest thing isn't that you stole from me when we were kids, it's that you built your whole adult life on that lie. And you were going to let your wife live it too. Jake called me 17 times that night. Sarah called off the engagement the next morning. What's the funniest thing you've received in a care package? Iraq 2008. My grandmother had been sending me packages every month, cookies, jerky, magazines, the usual stuff. But the August package was different, way heavier than normal. I opened it in front of my entire squad. The first layer looked normal, cookies, some candy, and a couple magazines. Underneath was something wrapped in about 10 layers of bubble wrap and duct tape. My grandmother wasn't taking any chances with whatever this was. I unwrapped it slowly, the guy were gathered around like it was Christmas morning. Final got to the center and pull out a full-size ceramic garden gnome, bright red hat, blue jacket and fishing pole in his hands. A card taped to his head read, "This is Gerald, he's your battle buddy now." The entire tent erupted in laughter, but it got better. My grandmother had included a 3-page typed letter explaining Gerald's mission. Apparently she'd been watching too much news about soldiers getting PTSD and decided I needed a friendly face to keep me company and remind me of home. The letter had detailed instructions. Gerald had to be positioned so he could keep watch over our area. She'd researched military tactics online and decided that a garden gnome would provide excellent camouflage in desert environments because the enemy would never suspect garden decor. My squad sergeant walked over to see what the commotion was about and looked at Gerald and just shook his head. Well, I've seen soldiers bring teddy bears, but this is a first. What's his rank? Without missing a beat I said, he's a specialist, sergeant. Specialize in morale and perimeter security. Fair enough. Find him a spot. So we did, we set Gerald up on a sandbag next to our bunker. Within hours other soldiers were coming by to meet him. Word spread fast. Delta Company's got a garden gnome on security duty, but here's where it gets really funny. My grandmother had apparently coordinated with other family members. Over the next few months care packages started arriving with accessories for Gerald. My aunt sent a tiny Kevlar helmet that actually fit him perfectly. My cousin shipped a miniature flak jacket. My uncle, a Vietnam vet, sent military patches to put on Gerald's jacket. Gerald became the unofficial mascot of our FOB. Soldiers would pose for pictures with him before patrols. New guys had to be introduced to Gerald as part of their orientation. The base photographer even included him in official unit photos. The best part came during a surprise inspection by a visiting colonel. This full bird walks into our area, stops dead in his tracks when he sees Gerald in full uniform standing guard, doesn't say anything for a full 30 seconds, just stares. Finally he asks, "Soldier, why is there a garden gnome in combat gear at your position?" My squad leader, completely serious, responds, "Sir, that's Specialist Gerald. He's been assigned to morale operations and perimeter observation." His grandmother wrote a letter confirming his deployment. The colonel actually read the letter, all 3 pages, started chuckling halfway through. When he was finished he was laughing so hard he had to sit down. "This is the best psychological operations brief I've read in 20 years, he said. "Gerald's doing important work here. Carry on." Gerald deployed with us for 15 months, never missed a day of duty, survived 2 mortar attacks and a sandstorm that lasted 3 days. When we rotated home there was serious discussion about Gerald's next assignment. My grandmother solved the problem. She'd already ordered 6 more gnomes, 1 for each soldier in my squad. Gerald's trained them well, her letter explained. They're ready for deployment. Those gnomes are now scattered across military bases worldwide. I still get updates. Gerald Jr. is currently serving in Afghanistan. Gerald III just finished a tour in South Korea. Gerald IV is stationed in Germany, apparently learning the local customs. My grandmother passed away 2 years ago. At her funeral 6 active duty soldiers showed up in dress blues, each carrying a garden gnome. We buried Gerald Sr., who'd earned an honorable retirement after completing his service. The funeral director had never a military honor guard that included garden gnomes, neither had the other Morns. But my grandmother would have loved every minute of it. Sometimes the funniest care packages contain exactly what you need, even when you don't know you need it. And sometimes a garden gnome becomes the best soldier in your unit. What made the high school legend become a legend? We had a teacher who was infamous for not letting you go to the bathroom no matter what. I mean, so much so that if you accidentally started your period during class she made you wait. Everyone dreaded having Mrs. Peterson for sophomore English because of this one ridiculous rule. She'd stand there with her arms crossed, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and lecture us about planning out biological functions around her precious class time. There was a girl in our class who we'll call Stephanie. Stephanie wasn't your typical troublemaker, but she wasn't afraid to speak her mind either. She'd already clashed with Mrs. Peterson multiple times that semester about the bathroom policy. Katie had asked to go 3 times already that month and been shot down every single time. Once she practically begged, saying it was an emergency, but Mrs. Peterson just pointed to the clock and said, "You should have gone during lunch." Stephanie came the next day with a doctor's note explained that she had a medical condition that sometimes required urgent bathroom breaks, but Mrs. Peterson just filed it away and ignored it completely. By the time finals week rolled around, everyone was stressed and on edge. The classroom was stuffy that day, the ancient heating system cranked up way too high, and we were all sweating through our shirts. About halfway through Mrs. Peterson's lecture on Shakespeare, Stephanie raised her hand. "Mrs. Peterson, may I please use the restroom?" she asked politely, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Mrs. Peterson didn't even look up from her book. "No, Stephanie, you know the rules." Katie waited 5 minutes, visibly uncomfortable now, squirming in her chair trying to focus on her notes. She raised it again. "Mrs. Peterson, I really need to go." "It's urgent," Stephanie said, her voice strained. "I said no the first time, the answer hasn't changed." 5 minutes passed, the clock seemed to be moving in slow motion. Stephanie's face was getting flushed and she was biting her lips so hard I thought it might bleed. She raised her hand one more time, more desperately now. "Mrs. Peterson, please. You're not going to like what happens if I can't go to the bathroom right now." The entire room went silent. No one had ever challenged Mrs. Peterson like this before. Mrs. Peterson slammed her book shut and marched over to Stephanie's desk, looming over her like a vulture. "Is that a threat, young lady? One more word out of you and you'll be spending the rest of the day in Principal Walker's office. Is that clear?" Stephanie looked her dead in the eyes, shrugged her shoulders and calmly said, "This is on you then," and then she did it. Right there in her seat, Stephanie just let go. The sound of liquid hitting the plastic chair and then dripping onto the floor echoed through the dead silent classroom. A few gasps broke out, but mostly everyone was just frozen in shock. Mrs. Peterson's face cycled through about 15 different emotions in 3 seconds. "Get out," she screamed, pointing to the door. "Get out and go to the principal's office immediately." Stephanie surprisingly stood up from the puddle and walked out with her head high. The remaining hour of class was the most awkward 60 minutes of my life. The janitor had to be called. Later that day we heard Stephanie had been sent home. Apparently Principal Walker had called Stephanie's parents, and her father, who we found out was a urologist at the university hospital, had absolutely lost it. He'd stormed into the school, credentials in hand, and explained in excruciating medical detail to both the principal and Mrs. Peterson how dangerous it is to force someone to hold it for extended periods. He outlined all the potential health issues. "Do you know what could happen to my daughter's health because of your ridiculous power trip?" he reportedly yelled. "Would you like me to bring in my medical textbooks and show you what bladder infections look like when they spread?" Mrs. Peterson was put on administrative leave for a week. When she came back she was different, quieter, less sure of herself, and the restroom policy was completely gone.
"What innocent thing did your parents hide from you that came back 20 years later?" "My parents told me our basement door was permanently locked because of dangerous old wiring. For 12 years I never questioned it. The basement was simply off limits. A forbidden zone in our otherwise normal suburban home. Mom would nervously change the subject whenever I asked about it, and Dad would firmly remind me that the electrician had deemed it unsafe for children. I assumed they were being typical overprotective parents. Then one weekend when I was 17 they left town for my aunt's wedding. I stayed behind because of a track meet. While looking for the spare garage door opener I noticed something peculiar above the basement door. A small brass key sitting on top of the door frame, hidden in plain sight all these years. Of course I used it. With my heart pounding I turned the key, half expecting to discover something sinister. Instead the basement wasn't scary at all. Just a perfectly normal finished space with a comfortable looking couch, an old TV, and a mini fridge stocked with my dad's favorite beer. There were family photos on the walls and a shelf of board games. It looked like a pleasant hangout space, not the trap of exposed wires and crumbling foundation I'd been warned about. The only unusual thing was a large closet with a heavy padlock. Now thoroughly committed to my investigation, I watched some amateur lockpicking tutorials on YouTube and managed to open it after an hour of frustrating attempts. Inside were hundreds of beautifully wrapped Christmas and birthday presents, organized by holiday and year. Every gift I'd ever received from Santa or supposedly sent by distant relatives was actually bought months in advance and hidden here. There were even presents labeled for my upcoming 18th birthday, still months away. My parents were planning celebrations in advance. I carefully locked everything back up and never mentioned it. The basement became my secret too. Whenever they left town, I'd sneak down there to watch the old movies my dad had recorded on VHS. Sometimes I would read the cards attached to my future presents, touched by how much thought was put into selecting gifts that matched my changing interests. Fast forward 20 years, my wife Chelsea and I have a 5-year-old daughter named Jordan, and we've been searching for a larger home. By incredible coincidence, my parents decided to downsize to a Florida condo right as we began house hunting. They offered us a family discount on my childhood home and we jumped at the chance. During renovations, we decided to expand the basement into a proper playroom for Jordan. The contractor called me down one day confused about the building plans. There's supposed to be another 8 feet beyond this wall according to the original blueprints. We discovered my parents had actually walled off a section of the basement, Beyond that gift closet, there was a small room I had never found during my teenage explorations. Contractor broke through, revealing a space that left me speechless. Inside was a meticulously preserved collection of every drawing, craft project, and homemade card I'd ever gifted my parents. My horrible kindergarten finger paintings were professionally framed. School assignments where I'd received good grades were displayed in acid-free protective sleeves. Every Father's Day tie, every Mother's Day clay handprint, every glitter-covered Christmas ornament, all arranged like priceless museum pieces with little handwritten date cards. There were dozens of photo albums documenting ordinary moments. Me losing my first tooth, learning to ride a bike, falling asleep reading. Things I didn't even remember. One wall held a growth chart with meticulous measurements from ages 2 through 17. Another had shelves with time capsules, shoeboxes labeled with each year of my childhood containing movie ticket stubs, birthday cards from friends, and small mementos. Yesterday, I called my mom to tell her what we'd found. "We thought you knew," she said quietly. "That's why we kept the door locked when you were little." "Because of dangerous wiring?" I asked with a laugh. "No, honey, we were afraid you'd find it and realize how absurdly sentimental we were about every scrap of paper you touched. Your father especially, that tough man who never cried at movies, was the one who insisted on the archival quality storage boxes. We were embarrassed to let you see just how much we adored you." She paused, then added, "We worried you'd think it was weird or creepy that we saved everything. Teenagers can be so critical, you know. We didn't want you rolling your eyes at our shrine to you." Today, I'm carefully taking inventory of the room's contents before we renovate, and I've started a similar collection for Jordan, hidden in our attic.
When have you said that's not my name? When I was 8, I got called to the principal's office over the intercom, but instead of my name, they called Jose Martinez. I just sat there confused because my name is Joseph Martin. They called it again louder, Jose Martinez, to the office immediately. My teacher looked at me and said, "That's you, right? Just go." I walked down the hallway completely confused. I'd never been in trouble before and I had no idea what this was about. My stomach was in knots thinking about what I could have possibly done wrong. The walk felt like it took forever and other kids were staring at me as I left class. When I got to the office, the secretary looked annoyed and started tapping her pen impatiently on her desk. Finally, "Why didn't you come the first time I called your name?" I said quietly. "My name isn't Jose Martinez, it's Joseph Martin." She rolled her eyes like I was being difficult on purpose. "Same thing. Jose is just the Spanish version of Joseph." I stared at her trying to process what she'd just said. "I'm not Spanish, I'm Italian-American." She waved her hand dismissively like she was swatting away a fly. "Martinez, Martin, whatever. Your people all have similar names anyway. Close enough." I felt my face get hot and my chest tightened. Even at 8 years old, I knew something was really wrong with what she was saying. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened either. Last month they'd given me someone else's report card. "Why people?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You know what I mean," she said, not even looking up from her paperwork. "Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. We're busy here." That's when my mom walked in for our scheduled meeting about my gifted program placement. She'd been fighting all year to get me into advanced classes, but the school kept making excuses about why I wasn't quite ready despite my test scores being in the 95th percentile. She'd heard the entire exchange. My mom, who was normally soft-spoken and polite, absolutely lost it. "Excuse me, did you just say your people about my 8-year-old son?" The secretary looked up, suddenly realizing someone had been listening. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. We just had a little mix-up with names. Happens all the time." "A mix-up?" My mom's voice was getting louder and sharper. "You called him Jose Martinez when his name is clearly Joseph Martin. Then you told him it was close enough because of his people." "I think you're overreacting," the secretary said, but she was starting to look nervous and kept glancing towards the principal's office door. "Am I?" My mom pulled out her phone, because I recorded the whole thing when I walked in, every single word. The secretary's face went completely white. Her hands started shaking slightly as she fumbled with her papers. "Let me ask you something," my mom continued, her voice deadly calm now. "How many times has my son been confused with other students this year? How many times have his test scores been lost? How many times have you told me he's not quite ready for advanced programs despite his perfect grades?" The principal's door suddenly opened. He'd been listening from inside his office the entire time. "Mrs. Martin, please come in and bring Joseph with you." 20 minutes later, we walked out with a formal written apology. The secretary was getting written up for discrimination and I was officially enrolled in every single advanced program I'd applied for. They also promised to review all my records from the beginning of the year. Turns out they'd been mixing up my records with several other students all year long. Somehow, all of us had been getting lower placement recommendations than our test scores actually showed.
What is your best present revenge story? Refuse to give the gift you promised my daughter? Fine, I'll take away the gift I got for you. This year I got a new job that finally paid me well after years of struggling, so I went all out for Christmas. I wanted to spoil my family, especially my 9-year-old daughter, who's been incredibly kind, responsible, and helpful. She's done great in school, helps around the house without being asked, and is just the kind of kid you want to reward. I got her 3 big gifts and 3 smaller ones, nothing excessive but enough to make the holiday feel magical for her. My mother-in-law showed up early Christmas Eve and immediately noticed the pile of gifts under the tree. I explained that I'd been fortunate this year and wanted to make it special for everyone, including her, but when she found out how many of the gifts were for my daughter, she got upset. She said a 9-year-old doesn't need that many gifts and announced that she wouldn't be giving my daughter the present she had promised. One my daughter had been looking forward to, it was a doll she'd talked about non-stop. I tried reasoning with her, it's not like I spoil my daughter year-round. Christmas is the one time of year when I can go big, but my mother-in-law insisted it would be a lesson in not always getting what you want. My wife told me to let it go, saying that since it was her mother's gift, she had the right to withhold it. Fine, if that's the logic we're using, then it goes both ways. What my mother-in-law didn't know was that I had spent weeks tracking down a designer handbag she had gushed about. It was a $600 gift, the most expensive one I got for anyone. But after her decision, I quietly removed it from under the tree and replaced it with a $40 bathrobe I had on standby as a backup gift. Christmas morning rolled around and the living room buzzed with excitement. My daughter was thrilled with her gifts, showing gratitude even without the doll she'd hoped for. She didn't pout or complain, she just beamed with joy. That made the whole effort worth it. Then it was my mother-in-law's turn to open her gift from me. She tore into the wrapping expecting something extravagant and pulled out the bathrobe. Her face visibly fell, though she quickly tried to recover with a forced smile. "Oh, thank you," she said. "Is this from you?" she continued. "Yep," I said with a polite nod. "Sorry if it wasn't what you were hoping for, but you know we can't always get what we want." My wife gave me a look later when we were alone. She asked if that was really necessary. I reminded her of what she'd said. Everyone can do what they want with the gifts they give, I just followed their lead. Later that afternoon, my mother-in-law approached me and quietly handed over the doll to my daughter, calling it a late surprise. My daughter was ecstatic. She gave her grandma a big hug, thrilled to receive it with not a hint of resentment. That's just the kind of person she is. Meanwhile, I didn't have to say a word. The message was clear and justice was done in the most festive way possible.
What is your I came for trash, but found treasure moment? I was 19, failing out of business school, and absolutely hating my life. My dad, who paid my tuition, gave me an ultimatum. Pull your grades up or get a job. College was my ticket out of our small town, so desperately searched for any easy way to boost my GPA. That's when I spotted it. Introduction to pottery. Perfect. I can make a few ashtrays, ace the class, and get my dad off my back. The first day, I walked in late, slouched in the back row, and barely listened as the professor, Mrs. Chun, demonstrated something with clay. I was too busy texting my friends about weekend plans. "You there in the black hoodie?" she called out. "Since you clearly know enough about ceramics to ignore my demonstration, perhaps you'd like to show the class how it's done." My face burning, I stumbled to the front. The clay wheel spun as I placed my hands on the wet clay, making an immediate mess. Everyone laughed. Everyone except Mrs. Chun. "Come back after class," she said quietly. "Great. Extra homework." When everyone left, I expected a lecture. Instead, she asked why I was there. I gave her my rehearsed answer about needing arts credits. She just stared at me for an uncomfortable minute before saying, "No. Why are you really here?" Something about her intensity broke through my practiced indifference. "I don't know anymore," I admitted. "I'm failing everything. I just need an easy A." She nodded. "Well, you won't find that here, but let me show you something." She sat at the wheel, took a lump of gray clay, and began to work. Her hands moved with such precision, such care, the shapeless mass transformed into a delicate vase before my eyes. "I failed out of medical school," she said as she worked. "My parents didn't speak to me for 3 years. Now my work sits in museums. That wasn't the path anyone planned for me." She stood up and guided me to the wheel. "Try again, but this time feel the clay. Listen to what it wants to become." I almost walked out. It sounded like new age nonsense, but I was already failing everything else, so what did I have to lose? For 2 hours, she patiently guided my hands. By the end, I made a small wobbly bowl. It was objectively terrible, but I'd made something with my hands. And for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of something. "Same time Thursday," she asked. I found myself nodding. I kept coming back, not just during class hours, but evenings and weekends too. The ceramics studio became my sanctuary. While other students saw the class as an easy credit, I started seeing possibilities in the clay. 3 months in, Mrs. Chun entered one of my pieces in a local art fair without telling me. It won 3rd place in the student category, $50 and a blue ribbon. $50 for something I made. My dad came to see it, confused why his business major son was suddenly winning art prizes. He stood silently in front of my ceramic sculpture, a series of interconnected hands I titled Family. "You made this?" he finally asked. I nodded, waiting for his disappointment. Instead, he touched my shoulder and said, "I never knew you had this in you." That summer, I switched my major to fine arts. My dad wasn't thrilled, but the blue ribbon stayed on our fridge door. Mrs. Chun became my mentor. She pushed me harder than any professor ever had. No easy A's in her world. "Art isn't about talent," she'd say. "It's about showing up day after day and doing the work." 7 years later, I stood in a New York gallery, surrounded by my ceramic sculptures. The centerpiece was a life-sized figure rising from a wheel, half-formed, reaching upward. The plaque beside it read, "Becoming dedicated to Jade Chun." Mrs. Chun flew in for the opening. Now in her 70s, she moved slowly through the crowd, examining each piece. When she reached the centerpiece, she smiled. "Not bad for someone looking for an easy A," she said, squeezing my hand. Last month, the Museum of Modern Art acquired that sculpture for their permanent collection. When they asked about my inspiration, I told them about a pottery class I took to avoid math credits, and a teacher who saw something in me that I couldn't yet see in myself. What immediately tells you someone is a bad parent? I was 12 when I threw my first real birthday party. My parents finally let me invite whoever I wanted, and I was so excited I invited literally everyone in my class, even the quiet kids who usually got left out. One of those kids was Marcus. He never talked much, always wore the same 3 shirts, and ate alone at lunch. But when I handed him the invitation, his whole face just lit up. He said it would be his first real birthday party ever. The day arrived, and my backyard looked amazing. My dad set up games, strung lights everywhere, and built an elaborate obstacle course. My mom made this incredible 3-layer chocolate cake, and we had pizza, soda, and candy stations. Kids started showing up, and everyone was having a blast. Then Marcus arrived with his mom. She said hello, complimented the decorations, and brought a small wrapped gift. Marcus was practically bouncing with excitement, running around trying to talk to everyone. I'd never seen him so happy in my entire life. But then I started noticing weird things. Marcus's mom kept walking around the party, picking up little items and examining them closely. She flipped through my mom's magazines on the patio table. Check out the brand names on our outdoor furniture. When my mom caught her, she just smiled and said she was admiring our beautiful home. During the games, Marcus was finally coming out of his shell. He was laughing, high-fiving other kids, screaming with joy during the water balloon toss. Other kids were actually talking to him for once. His mom, though, kept checking her phone and walking around our yard with this strange intensity, like she was mapping out every corner of our property. When we moved inside for pizza, I caught her in her hallway, just standing there looking at family photos on the wall. Just using the bathroom, she said when she saw me. My mom started keeping a closer eye on her after that. The party games continued, and Marcus was having the time of his life. He won the treasure hunt, mailed the limbo contest, and was finally acting like a normal kid. When we brought out cake, Marcus practically glowed. All 15 kids gathered around singing happy birthday, and I made my wish. As I was cutting the cake, Marcus's mom appeared right next to me. "This is such a nice setup you have here," she said, her eyes scanning the presents table loaded with gift bags and wrap boxes. "You're so lucky to have all this nice stuff. Some kids don't get anything." I just nodded and kept cutting cake. After everyone finished eating, we moved to present time. My favorite part. Marcus sat right in front watching me open everything with this amazed expression, like he couldn't believe he was experiencing a real birthday party. I was halfway through the pile when Marcus's mom tapped my shoulder. "Hey, sweetie, Marcus and I need to leave early. He has a doctor's appointment I completely forgot about." Marcus's face absolutely crumbled. "Mom, no, the party's not over. You promised we could stay the whole time. Please, we have to go right now. Get your jacket." As they gathered their things, I noticed Marcus's mom casually stuffing something into her oversized purse. Then I saw her slip something under her arm while pretending to help clean up. My mom saw too. "Excuse me," my mom said in a firm voice. "I think you accidentally picked up one of the birthday gifts." Marcus's mom froze completely. "Oh, this old thing? Marcus wanted to help carry presents to your car for you. Such a helpful boy. Those presents are staying right here." The two moms stared at each other for what felt like forever. Other parents stopped talking and started watching. Finally, Marcus's mom slowly put the present back down, grabbed Marcus's hand way too tight, and started walking toward our back gate. That's when Marcus looked back at me with actual tears streaming down his face and mouthed "I'm sorry" before disappearing through the gate. I stood there holding my half-open present, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. His mom didn't bring him to a birthday party. She brought him his cover for a robbery. "When did you flip the script at work?" My micromanaging boss tracked our bathroom breaks with a timer. She'd actually stand outside the door, counting minutes, 5 minutes max, or she'd knock and ask if you needed medical attention. It was humiliating. When I first interviewed, nobody mentioned Carol's bathroom obsession. The pay was decent, the benefits were good, and I was desperate after 3 months of unemployment. My first day started normally enough. Orientation, paperwork, and meeting the team. Then came my first bathroom break. I just closed the stall door when I heard Carol's voice echo through the bathroom. "Jessica, I'm starting your timer now. Company policy is 5 minutes maximum." I froze thinking it was some weird joke. It wasn't. I rushed out in 4 minutes, face burning with embarrassment, to find Carol literally checking her watch. "Good job," she said, like I was a toddler who'd successfully used the potty. Some people take advantage. Later, I whispered to my cubicle neighbor Matthew about it, and he just shrugged. "Been like this for 2 years. She times everyone. Last month, Ryan had food poisoning, and she wrote him up for excessive bathroom use." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Nobody's complained?" Matthew laughed bitterly. "Carol handles all performance reviews and promotion recommendations. Cross her, and suddenly you're not meeting expectations." He lowered his voice. 3 people complained to HR last year, all gone within 2 months. Over the next several weeks, I watched grown adults rush to and from the bathroom, timing themselves on their phones to avoid Carol's knock of shame. I saw my colleague Maria nearly in tears when her IBS flared up and Carol loudly announced, "That's your 3rd time today, Maria. Is this going to be a regular occurrence?" Instead of quitting, I got angry. During lunch breaks, I started researching labor laws at the library across the street. I printed OSHA regulations, Department of Labor guidelines, and ADA protections. Turns out reasonable bathroom access is legally protected. Employers can't monitor or restrict bathroom use in ways that compromise dignity or health. I compiled everything into a professional-looking document with highlighted sections. Then, early one morning before anyone arrived, I posted copies in the break room, by the water cooler, and inside each bathroom stall. I didn't sign my name. When Carol arrived and saw the papers, she turned a shade of red I'd never seen on a human being. She ripped them down, crumpling them in her fists. "Who put these up?" she demanded during our morning huddle. "This is insubordination." Nobody spoke. She glared at each of us. "I will find out who did this." By lunchtime, I received an email requesting my presence in the conference room. My heart pounded as I walked in to find Carol sitting with our HR representative and the regional manager Thomas, who rarely visited our office. "Jessica," Carol began, her voice sickly sweet. "I believe you're behind the disruptive materials posted around the office this morning." I remained calm. "What material specifically are you referring to?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "The bathroom policy nonsense." Thomas leaned forward. "Actually, I'd like to understand what policy we're discussing." Carol mentioned something about time management issue. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. For the past week, I've documented every bathroom break I've taken, including when Carol timed me from outside the door. I've also collected statements from 6 colleagues who experienced the same treatment. I slid the folder across the table. According to OSHA standards, restricting bathroom use this way constitutes a violation of workers' rights to physical comfort and health. The HR rep's eyes widened as she flipped through my documentation. "You've been standing outside bathroom doors with a timer?" he asked Carol. She stammered about productivity metrics and abuse of break times, but her explanation fell flat. The next morning, Thomas called an all-staff meeting. He announced that effective immediately, the bathroom monitoring practice was terminated. 2 weeks later, we received an email that Carol had decided to pursue opportunities elsewhere. What's something a high school teacher told you that stuck with you? My economics teacher, Mr. Bryant, had the bizarre punishment system that still gives me nightmares. If you were caught talking during his test, you had to teach the entire next class while he sat in your seat, grading you on your performance. Everyone thought it was a joke until Natalie got caught whispering about question 4 to someone. The next day, Mr. Bryant walked in with a coffee, plopped down in her seat, and pointed to the front of class. "It's all yours, teach," he said with that evil smirk. Poor Natalie stood there trembling, trying to explain supply and demand curves. She kept saying and like every 2 seconds. Mr. Bryant started marking tallies on a paper for each filler word. By minute 5, she was in tears. That's when I got this crazy idea. I was actually good at economics, not because I liked it, but because my dad wouldn't shut up about stocks at dinner. I figured if I got caught talking during the next test, I could turn Mr. Bryant's punishment into a show. So during our midterm, I very obviously whispered, "Hey, what did you get for number 7? He practically skipped over to my desk, writing up the violation slip with pure joy. The next day, I showed up early wearing a full suit and carrying a briefcase I'd stolen from my dad's office. Mr. Bryant raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as he took my usual seat. I opened the briefcase, slowly pulling out a laser pointer and a stack of handouts. "Today, class," I announced in my best businessman voice, "we're discussing how TikTok dances affect the global economy." The entire class sat up straight. Even Mr. Bryant looked intrigued. I started drawing elaborate charts showing how viral dances increased phone sales because people needed better cameras. I explained how dance trends boosted athletic wear purchases because everyone wanted to look good in their videos. I even included a live demonstration, doing the worst rendition of a popular dance while explaining how choreographers could copyright their moves for profit. The class was losing it, but I kept a straight face. Halfway through, I pulled out bags of candy. "In economics, we call this an incentive," I explained, tossing them to anyone who answered my questions correctly. Mr. Bryant actually started raising his hand to participate. For my grand finale, I presented a case study on the economics of high school dating, complete with graphs showing how the supply of eligible students decreased as finals approached due to stress and caffeine addiction. I ended the class by passing out investment portfolios, just folders filled with memes about the stock market. As everyone left, they were actually talking about economics. Some kids even asked when I'd be teaching again. Mr. Bryant called me to his desk after class. I thought I was in trouble, but he was grinning. That, he said, was the best explanation of market influence I've ever seen. From that day on, his punishment changed. Instead of forcing kids to teach when they got caught talking, he made them attend what he called Professor Pete's Economic Comedy Hour, my weekly voluntary tutoring sessions where I helped struggling students understand economics through memes and jokes. By the end of the year, our class had the highest AP test scores in school history. Mr. Bryant even asked me to help train new teachers on how to make economics engaging. At graduation, he pulled me aside and handed me an envelope. Inside was a job offer. His investment firm wanted me as a summer intern. "Not because of your grades," he said, "but because anyone who can make 30 teenagers care about economic policy at 8 a.m. has a future in business." I took the job. 10 years later, I'm a partner at his firm.